Welcome to Brilliant Talk. Again, we've been talking to a brilliant mind, a public certified accountant, an economist, and a guy that has done this or does this for a living. We were talking earlier how Kenya is spending 1 trillion every year on budget deficits. It's every year it's losing 1 trillion shillings, which actually translates to $7.8 billion. So Kenya spends 4 trillion shillings every year, and every year it's behind on its debt, on its bills, a trillion. So pretty much it's adding every year 1 trillion shillings. That translates to $7.8 billion. So Mwangi, let me just run through some of these facts about these counties. We've been talking about Turkana County. We've also touched on Mandera County and Tana River County. We are not picking any county. We're going to be talking about different counties. We don't have any agenda against any county. But for us to be able to understand and have a better glimpse of what we are dealing with, we have to dig into the numbers. So let me just read you a few facts about Turkana, or Turkana, as some may say, county. Turkana County has the least literacy rate in the country. 20% of people there have gone to school. 80% have never seen a classroom. 80% of residents in Turkana County have never been in a class. Only half of school-aged children are enrolled in schools. 88% of people in Turkana County live below the poverty line. And for me to define what the poverty line is, according to Kenya, it's $2.15 a day, or 280 Kenya shillings a day. So 88% of people in Turkana County live below the $2.15 a day. 57% of the girls are married below 18 years of age. The major economic activities in this county are fishing and pastoralism. Pretty much, they go fish in Lake Turkana, and they take care of their livestock out in the arid areas. So, looking at those facts and also Turkana, as you look at their numbers, what can you tell us more from what you deduce from the budgets and the books?
Yeah, thanks again for the opportunity. What you're doing is you're giving context, right? Because, I always tell people, all these numbers don't mean anything until you actually understand the context, right? Mm-hmm. I can come here and tell you that the governor of Turkana County spent $1.1 billion on travel, but unless you understand, what other needs were there in that county, and then you can kind of look at that relative to how the government spend money. That's the only way you start to appreciate some of these issues, right? You're talking about some of the poorest counties in our country. Turkana County dead last on every measure of human progress that you want to look at, whether you're talking about access to healthcare, literacy rates, child mortality rates, anything you want to look at, dead last, right? You look at a place like Mandera County, almost dead last. These counties are in the bottom 5 of everything you want to look at, whether it's access to healthcare, whether you're talking about annual incomes, whether you're talking about access to education, all of those things. And again, this model of system that we have is supposed to serve the citizens, right? It's supposed to bring opportunities to this local areas. It's supposed to make sure that a kid who wants to go to school in Tana River, in Turkana County, in Mandera, has access to a good school that's functioning, something comparable to what other kids in Mombasa, in Nakuru, in Kiambu have. But that's not what's happening. Again, our structure of government was well-intentioned, but it lacks the structures necessary to make sure that it functions properly. If you cannot control how the money is spent once it gets to the counties, right? Particularly because we know that although we have a lot of laws obviously criminalizing, corruption, right, and pilferage of public resources, our system of government just doesn't work. It doesn't work. You are seeing someone, for example, the previous governor of Turkana, stole billions of shillings from some of the poorest people in the country. This is not conjecture. It's not innuendo. We are talking about facts that have been substantiated. Stole billions of shillings from that county, right? Left that county towards the last days of his term in office. He attempted to inflate pending bills by 5 billion, so that when he gets out, he can take 5 billion with him from a county that has a poverty rate above 80%, a literacy rate of 20%. I mean, we are attracting the very worst of people to these offices. And what's worse is that we put these people into office. So when you see me spending a lot of time trying to provide civic education, is because I realize that the gap between sort of good, responsible behavior at the ballot box and where we are now is that gap of people not having the right information. I feel like if people understand how their money is being spent, a lot of people don't know how much money is spent on governors' cars. They don't know that, right? They don't know how much their governor is spending on trips abroad. So I've seen people in these counties take a trip to go to Dubai, to go say thank you because someone gave the county some food donations. A county selects 4 people, they put them on a flight, they book a flight and send them to Dubai to go say thank you for giving us a donation. I mean, that's what we're talking about. Again, our situation, as dire as it is, it's something we've chosen for ourselves, and so
pretty much these guys are looking for any opportunity to spend the money, any opportunity. Let me also get some facts, Mr. Mwangi. Let's just look again at Mandera County.
Right.
Again, we are trying to bring context here, guys. One thing about Mandera County, it's very unique in time because men outpopulate the women on a 10-point margin. Think about that. Not too many places men outnumber women.
Right.
But in Mandera County, there's a 10-point margin between men and women. Men are about 54.9%, while women are about 44.9%. Mandera is a vastly desert, semi-arid area. The literacy rate is 30%. That means 70% of residents in Mandera County have no formal education. And those that have some formal education are 5% with a primary school education, or what you call elementary school. It is the least developed county in Kenya with the lowest GDP of 67,518 Kenya shillings. I would say when talk about GDP, we're talking about gross domestic product. In this time, we're probably talking about county gross domestic product. That is the average output per resident in Mandera, which actually translates to 521 shillings and 30 cents. $521.30. Think about that. Right. The least developed county in Kenya with the lowest GDP, 67,518 shillings. I repeat, $521.30. The major economic activities in this county are pastoralism and agriculture, mostly livestock, and 89.1% of residents live in abject poverty. Not just poverty, but abject, 89.1%. Go ahead, Mr. Mwangi.
So just think of those numbers that you just read, right? Average income rate of 67,000 in that county. 89% poverty rate. Poverty means that that family cannot put 2 meals on the table each day, right? It's a very hard thing for them to do that. Almost non-existent access to healthcare, almost non-existent infrastructure, right? Education almost non-existent, right? And then you hear that that county, right, only spent 350 million on bursaries for that year. To be honest with you, even that is doubtful, right? But that's what they told us they spent. But they spent 1.1 billion on travel. They spent 1.1 billion on travel, 350 million on bursaries.
So
okay.
1.1 billion on a few people to travel.
Sorry,
the county.
Actually, let me correct that. So, so the number that I gave you is for Turkana. Mandera County spent. Mandera County spent 19 million on foreign travel and 138 million on domestic travel. This is 2020 to 2023, so a total of 156. Again, 156 million is what they spent on travel, but they only made locally, in terms of local own service revenue, 123 million. So they've spent way more than they raised locally just traveling alone within the county. They don't have any problem in this county spending 380 million shillings on houses for the top 3 people in the county. Let me repeat that. Mandera County spent 380 million shillings on a house for the governor, the deputy governor, and the speaker of the assembly. So the top 3 people in the country, they spent 380 million for their houses. I haven't even talked about their cars. Those
just the houses. And
right.
The schools, just simply, there was no much money forthcoming.
Absolutely.
And they are dead last in literacy rates.
Absolutely. So we're talking about, I want Kenyans to know that our issue does not have a revenue issue. I mean, we talked about the fact that we have a budget of, let's say, 4 trillion, and we raised 3 trillion, let's say. 3 trillion can do a lot. If that, first of all, our country loses about 800 billion shillings every year to corruption. Okay? So that gap of 1 trillion that we talked about, you are 80% there fixing that issue if you just get rid of corruption. That's number one. Number two, just think about all the wastage that's taking place. Our counties in 2022-2023 spent 17 billion on travel. Okay? Much of this travel is unjustifiable, right? Again, I told you the people of, in this case, Mandera County, for example, don't get any benefit when these guys spend weeks and oftentimes, like if you add up the time that they spend outside the country, you can have a few months where, these MCAs are spending money out of the country. Singapore, Canada, Dubai, right? Arusha, right? They're always going somewhere. Look, I'm a private sector guy, right? I cannot imagine taking a job somewhere, and then as soon as I take the job, I tell my employer, the only way for me to function in this job is for you to keep sending me to Singapore and Malaysia and Canada and the US and Switzerland. If you don't do that, I cannot function. You
don't see the results of these troubles. There's just nothing to show for.
Absolutely, you don't. You do not. Right?
You know what? Actually, there's something I saw when I was researching on some of these counties. Let's also just quickly run through another county here.
Right.
I was actually I saw this website, Mandera County. Actually, going back to Mandera County, if you go to their website,
right.
There is a place where they talk about investments in the county.
Right.
The moment you click that page, it's blank. There's nothing. There's nothing. Okay. Now, when you go to other pages, it tells you who the office holders are, the ministries, what they are doing. I also saw in Mandera has fisheries, a ministry that deals with fisheries, a semi-arid land with nothing has a ministry that deals with fisheries. But when you go to the investment, where this is the main place, there's nothing to show for. There's nothing, no information, nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're referring to here is the what I would call the lack of common sense and the lack of business sense in leadership, right? A lot of the people that we put into these offices have never read anything. They've ran a kiosk. They don't understand the relationship between the capital that you invest and what you need to expect coming out of it, right? And so again, I go back to the issue of own service revenue. If you look at these counters and you ask yourself, how much money are they able to raise? The own service revenue is a very important proxy, in my view, for the economic prospects in a county, because If you spend 30 billion over 10 years somewhere and you realize that you're not going to get anything out of it, again, these counties, for example, Turkana County, much of the revenue is coming from charging, people slaughterhouse fees, right? That's what we're talking about. So, and you've invested 100 billion. So, I mean, people don't want to hear this, but the reality is that what you've done is you created 100 billion shilling slaughterhouse. Is that what you want? 100 billion shilling slaughterhouse operation? That's not what we should be doing. That is not what we should be doing. And so, it's important to have people that understand, that have some common sense. I mean, solving our problems, to be honest with you, is not something it's not rocket science, right? Mm-hmm. If you look at how much money we're wasting, and you look at how much money we're losing to corruption, this country can be fixed. Our issues are serious. I want to make sure that I do not, I don't want to, I don't want to, give the impression that these issues are not serious. They're serious issues, but they can be fixed. And the reason why they can be fixed is because we're not talking about rocket science. We're talking about using common sense, using business sense. Priorities, right? I give you an example of Turkana County where, Tana River County where, again, 33%, literacy rate, 67% poverty rate. But that county has no billion, taking almost $1 billion. It was actually 800 and something million from UNI, right? Mm-hmm. They take that money. In 2015, 2016. So think about it this way. 2015, 2016, the county took 50 million shillings from UNI for projects. They handed out projects in that county. If you read my analysis yesterday, you'll find out that almost in every case, somehow, magically, the only bidder for each of these contracts is one company. Right? So if there's a contract for developing an access road somewhere for 80 million, they just, for whatever reason, they only have one company bid on that. And oftentimes this company is unlicensed. Oftentimes this company has never done anything before. I saw a company that was formed 3 months before, and then literally 3 months after, they're able to bid on a contract for mortuary equipment. And they get that contract 3 months after formation, right? So when you think about how these contracts are awarded, where companies are formed 3 or 4 months before they bid on these contracts, and they win contracts for hundreds of millions, they've never done this before, they have no experience. It's not surprising that 850 million worth of projects given out in 2015, 2016, after a couple of years, and we've paid that money, these companies close shop, they take the money and run. And so we lost almost $1 billion from 2015, 2016, and not a citizen of Tana River County, not a citizen of our republic has ever benefited from that. You and I took that money, 850 million by now, it's almost 2 billion shillings. If you consider interest, and nobody benefited from that. And we're talking about a county with just bad statistics when it comes to poverty, when it comes to literacy.
For our info, for our audience, we are going to link you to Mr. Mwangi's analysis through his at his Twitter account, right?
Yes.
That's where he put his analysis. So when you're looking at this video, there will be a link below that will actually help you be able to digest what he's talking about. And I would also like to say that very likely some of these companies that are formed 3 months before the tenders are awarded, I would probably think they are probably connected to these guys. So, or they're friends or something like that, because not only are they siphoning funds through the system, through their salaries and allowances, but also another major way of enriching themselves is by forming these companies. They're able to stash the money and take the money away with their friends. I believe that's exactly what is going on. And that's why even when they go for interviews 3 years after they had these portfolios, you had someone who was worth 200,000 Kenya shillings, they're worth now 1 billion shillings. And you wonder what happened. Really, nothing has happened. So my fellow Kenyans, people who go in government, it's very lucrative. They go in government to make money on your own back. Mr. Mwangi.
it doesn't take being a genius to kind of connect the dots, right? If I'm governor of a county like Tana River County and I've issued close to 1 billion shillings in contracts for roads, for access, some of these smaller infrastructure projects within the county, and if you're not corrupt, and if everything is done on the up and up, and you issue contract close to 1 billion, and years go by and these companies are not delivering, what do you expect a normal, prudent, honest person to do? They're gonna go to court. They're gonna fight these companies, right? You're gonna make sure that, first of all, the law does not allow us to pay these companies for things that they do not do. For example, let's say you give a contract for 100 million, right? These amounts are supposed to be paid whenever certain milestones are achieved. So if let's say, for example, you can break down a contract into 4 milestones. They do the first milestone. You have a physical inspection of the project by people that are competent, right? People that are qualified. If they say, yep, 20% or 25% of it has been is certifiable, you get a certificate and you take that to the county and you get paid. That's how the law is supposed to work, right?
Yes.
But that's not what's happening. Again, oftentimes, when you spend time reading some of this and finding out how these contracts are worded, you can tell there's the game is rigged. The game is rigged. You will start, for example, if a project has 4 companies that participate and they all meet the initial criteria, oftentimes the people that are evaluating these projects come up with something where they introduce a new requirement that was not advertised or something. They just do something where they automatically kick the companies that they don't want to win the contract out, right? Oftentimes that's what you see in many counties. In the county of Tana River, for example, what we saw is something very different. They will have, this whole thing is orchestrated. It's like a charade, right? Where a project is advertised today, they have one company respond tomorrow, they close the advertisement even before the 14 days that are you're supposed to advertise. The contract is issued. Oftentimes, there's no, government is supposed to, there's a certain amount of procedure that's supposed to be followed, right, to make sure that everything is on the up and up. So if you issue a contract, there are documents that you're supposed to bring, for example, to show that you're not this is not a criminal enterprise. For example, you don't want to issue contracts to the mafia, right? So a company is supposed to show that it has a certificate of incorporation. It's supposed to show a tax compliance certificate to make sure that we know it's an entity that's paying taxes, right? If you look at Tana River, almost every contract was given to a company that does not have any of these things. It does not have a certificate of incorporation, has never paid taxes, was not even in business a few months ago. There was 531 million, for example, given to companies like that. 531 million in 1 year. These companies don't have a certificate of incorporation. You don't know who they are. I mean, if I come and tell you that my company's name is, Moriah Construction, I have no certificate of incorporation, I've never paid taxes, I don't have any references, and you give me a contract for 150 million, I take the money and then I disappear. That's how you end up with the situation that we have right now, where we spend so much money. And I keep telling people that the reason why this is important is that we've accumulated 9 trillion in debt as a country. You have to ask yourself, on the liability side of our balance sheet, we have 9 trillion. What do we have on the asset side? Right? What do we have on the asset? And I'm here to tell you that there's almost nothing.
There's
almost nothing.
So pretty much what Mr. Mwangi is saying, anytime there is a tender or the government wants to do something, they're actually supposed to advertise. And then what happens is that they open that space for companies that have the qualifications to bid on the job. And that's how people are able to save money. You find company A, B, and C are, or both or 3 qualified. Maybe one is saying that we can do this job for 10% less. The other one says they can do the job for 5% less. The other one says they can do 2.5% less. And also this gives the county people and the people in charge, they're able to look, what is your track record? Have you been able to deliver on similar projects in the past? Have you been able, do you pay taxes? So that you protect the interest of the county people and actually the national government. So therefore, again, this is, I'll just simply call a spade a spade. It's a racket system. You know what, Mr. Mwangi, some of the major takeaways I'm getting from this, now we have had a devolution going on now 14 years. This was in 2010 when this was brought forth. What I'm seeing is that there are no expectations. There are no goals for the counties to become independent, to be solvent, to be viable. Nothing, there are no goals. I don't see anything that says that maybe in the year 2025, we expect you, since you started in 2010, you started at zero. We expect you by the 10 years from now to be able to raise at least 30% of your revenues. I see nothing on that. And also another thing that I see when I look at these counties, they all have different numbers of MCAs. When you look at how they are, the formula, you're trying to get the formula of how they are awarded or how we get to know who the number of representatives. It's the ratio is all over the place. For example, looking at Mandera County, you have one representative to 25,000 residents. Tana River, you have one representative to 9,000 residents. In Turkana, you have one resident to 18,476 residents. So there is no standard. There are no definitions. Also, something I'm also seeing from this also is that nothing defines what are qualifying travel expenses. You know, you gotta be able to make it whereby these people are able to stay within the legal limits of what these definitions are. And we don't see any salary caps. We don't see any allowances. By the way, could you tell us the type of allowances you've seen these guys getting? Because again, what I see is just a hodgepodge. You just throw something, whatever it lands and sticks, that's it.
Right. So I want all people that are listening to this to go to my timeline on Twitter and take a look at my analysis of Mandera County that shocked the conscience of the country. I'm talking about, first of all, I told you, for example, the county of Tana River, if you look at the allowances relative to the basic salaries of the county government, it's 86%. So if your income is 100,000, you can expect 86% of that to be allowance added on top. They have allowances that you never heard of. I have seen allowance such as responsibility allowance, allowances such as tuition allowance, allowances such as risk allowance, right? Housing allowance. I am a private sector guy, right? I have spent a lot of time building a career, getting an education. I work for a great company, one of the best in the world. I have never seen a risk allowance on my payslip. I've never seen a responsibility allowance. I've never seen a tuition allowance. I've never seen a leave allowance, right? I've never seen the housing allowance. So all I'm telling you is this: Kenyans need to demand better. Kenyans need to send the message to these politicians that working for the government is not a license to go and sort of divert resources to yourself. It doesn't make any sense that our country, where the average income is 240,000, is essentially spending all its resources to support a small clique of corrupt politicians. That just doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. So we need to send the message. In my view, there's a couple of things that we need to do. The first one is Kenyans need to look at the structure of government that we have right now. I think we need to spend a lot of time thinking about where to make changes. I can tell you that I believe that this system of government is not serving Kenyans. Our government is too big. It needs to be reduced. I am not here to tell you that you don't need devolution, but I'm here to say that we don't need 47 counties. We do not need 47 counties. There is absolutely no reason for Lamu, a county with 140,000 people, to be a county on its own when it has absolutely no hope for economic viability. Give it 100 years.
Of the
Absolutely. I mean, if you take a county like, a county like Tana River, where it can only, think about this, it's 10 years after devolution. 10 years after devolution, Tana River County can only raise 1% of its revenue, 59 million shillings, Okay.
And these guys are driving in the big cars and
Exactly.
Mercedes-Benz and all that sort of stuff.
Exactly. Our system of government is premised on the idea that at some point, these counties should be self-sufficient for the most part, right? They should be self-sufficient because otherwise we can't have a system where everybody's a beggar and everyone is able to do whatever the heck they want with their budget. If Turkana County gets up tomorrow and decides to spend 20 billion as opposed to 18 billion, we have no way to tell them no, right? And so that doesn't work. We need to reduce the size of government. We need to reduce the number of counties. Frankly, we need to reduce the number of politicians that we have in the system. The second thing that we need to do is we need to reduce compensation. If the idea about going into government is to be able to serve the people, public service, you don't need to pay people that much money to attract the right people. You give the example of Georgia, where it's almost a volunteer situation where you go in and you're interested in helping out when it comes to policy. You don't see serving government as a way to make yourself rich. We need to reduce the number of politicians. We need to reduce the structure of the overall structure of government, and we need to reduce compensation. That's number one. Number two, we need to have a system where we can control how this money is being spent by these counties. We need to define what's acceptable. For example, expense as let's say relative to how much these counties can raise locally. So, for example, we say you cannot spend more than 5% on training or more than 5% on travel relative to the amount of money that you can raise locally, right? You start having some of these things, you're going to enforce discipline.
And you define what that is. You be very specific, because you can't give these people leeway, because what they have shown, they have absolute no discipline.
What our last 10 years have shown us is that you hope people are going to these sort of public offices have the public interest at heart, and they use common sense businesses. What we've seen is that doesn't work. You need to have a system to sort of enforce that. The other thing that we're going to need to do, frankly, is that we're going to need to be very, very deliberate in describing what we call development. Right? These counties are supposed to spend 30% of their funds developing the county. If you spend the amount of time that I have looking at what they actually call development, you will be depressed. Counties are spending hundreds of millions of shillings on, for example, you may have a situation like in Siak County where they spent close to 200 million to fence the offices of these MCAs, and they call that development, right? They might spend 150 million to build offices in certain wards, like new offices for these politicians. So they're spending a lot of money and they're telling you it's development. I mean, when you and I think of development, you think that this county is doing something to put itself in a situation where it's going to attract, economic activity. It's going to attract investors. It's going to attract skilled labor, right? But when you spend money fencing the house or the office of an MCA, that's not development. When you spend 10 million on a pit latrine, which I've seen counties do, yes, that's not development, right? And so, we have to get to that level where we actually define we almost have to give them a menu and say, you cannot do this.
You cannot trust these people at all.
Giving them the freedom to do it the way they as a police is not working for us.
So guys, again, we are going to put a link to Mr. Mwangi's analysis through his Twitter account below this video. Let me read some things that I actually read from your own Twitter analysis, where people are actually encouraging them to go. I'm going to read some of these allowances. Now, we're talking about Mandera County. Again, we don't have anything against Mandera County. We don't have anything against Tana River County. We don't have anything against Turkana County. We just picked up these three to start to look and see what's going on. We're going to be looking at other counties in another session. But from your page, we have basic salaries, we have house allowance, we have something called hardship allowance, we have commuter allowance, there is risk allowance, there is extraneous allowance. I don't know what extraneous allowance is. There is personal allowances paid. There is leave allowances. They have security services, they have cleaning services, they have travel, they have accommodation and subsistence allowances. Oh my God. They have foreign travel training and DSA, Oh Lord, my goodness. I can't even finish reading all this. It's just a list of ridiculous, ridiculous stuff.
Again, the important question every time, and I challenge Kenyans, when you read this analysis, and if you're going to have a debate about our system of government, the question that has to be central to any analysis or any discourse is, who is being served? Who are we serving? Mm-hmm. And so our structure of government, if you tell me that the whole idea of devolution is to serve the people, right? That has to be the criteria by which we use to evaluate whether we are actually succeeding or not. And so if you are spending money like that, right? You just went through an example of Mandera County, right? If that's how money is being spent, we're not serving Kenyans, right? We're not serving Kenyans. I can tell you that if you chase every shilling that we send to these counties and you try to follow that shilling to the last sort of use, a big fraction of the money is actually money that ends up in a small number of people's pockets. It's not, economy works. It's not magic, right? If I spend 100 billion and that money gets into the economy, right, and that money is exchanged, right, between different hands, there is a multiply effect, right? If I send, if you send money to Turkana County, and I work, let's say for, I'm a teacher, I'm employed, I get a salary, I go and I rent a house, or I want to decide now I want to build a house. I go and hire a mason and a carpenter to help build my house. And those who are going to be able to send their kids to school, they're going to go to the grocery store. It's not magic, right? This is not magic. And so that's why if you look at most societies, they're able to control development, they're able to control other, events in the economy by how much money is being released to the economy. What we are seeing in our system is that we release all that money, but it goes into a small number of pockets, right? It does not actually reach the people, right? Because if a governor can steal 5 billion and put that money in his pockets, right? If you are spending almost 50% of the money that's going there on salaries of people, right? You've paid $1 billion to 27 MCAs, then you spent another couple of billion paying the people that work for the governor and the deputy governor, and they're spending all this money traveling. There is very little that's actually serving anybody. I challenge people to go to my analysis from Tana River County yesterday and try to follow. And imagine you're still starting off with a budget of 8 billion. You've lost 4 billion just on travel, just on bureaucracy, right? Then you're left with 4 billion. And then you look at how much of that remainder is actually lost on these contracts, and there's almost nothing. There's almost nothing that ends up serving anybody. It's a depressing state of affairs.
Very good. So in conclusion, Mr. Mwangi, we are going to talk about this more on another session, but I just want to read you guys for the 1 minute remaining, just for comparison purposes. This is what's going on. Okay, Georgia, where I live, Georgia, the Georgia state in the U.S., the gross domestic product in 2023 was $661 billion. The governor of Georgia is paid $171,000 a year. So the average income of a Georgian is $58,682. So therefore, the Georgia governor gets at least 2.91 times the average income. The Georgia representatives are part-time. Right. These guys are just paid part-time and they only work just a few months for the year, and they are gone. So pretty much they don't come to make money, they come to serve people. Right. Texas, one of the largest economies, the second largest economy in the U.S. is $2.6 trillion. The governor makes $153,750 a year. The average income of the average Texan is $57,300. It's not even 3 times, it's 2.6 times the average income of the regular Texan. So anyway, we're going to be talking more about this. Mr. Mwangi, it was a privilege talking with you. Again, I encourage you guys to follow us and see what we are doing, and we're going to have the analysis below this video. Thank you so much. All the best. Until next time, this has been your host, Brilliant Talk, Maino Ajawona. Thank you.
Thank you so much.